Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let me make sure I am up. I'm seeing myself moving and shaking in the corner, so I'm going to take that as active. And let me check my sound. This one, unfortunately, cannot be long. It is going to be relatively quick. But again, I saw this, and I felt some way about it. So let me just talk about it. First of all, thank you everybody for showing up. I've had a few of these shows today, and I've got a pretty decent crowd. People don't necessarily know I come on a show this morning. I try to do these shows when I get the opportunity to do these shows, typically around 5 to 6 p.m. I will be doing a show today, this evening also, so stay tuned. But I did want to get some out of the way this morning. Also, thanks everybody for supporting the show. Thanks everyone for supporting the show. Like the video, dislike the video. Even if you dislike the video, if you gave me a fair hearing, thank you very much. If you at the very least see that I try to be honest, whether I like the person or not, regardless of the sides that the people are on, to the best that I can be, thank you very much. Also, tomorrow, Grant Cameron will be on the show at 5 p.m. That is not to be missed. That is going to be an amazing show. Hard Bastard is going to be here immediately after at 7. That is also going to be an amazing show. So definitely be there for those. So the United States has been ensconced in Russia mania. Russia, Russia, Russia. Everything is caused by Russia. African Americans aren't mad because they get shot in the face by cops and that cop walks without consequences. They're mad because of Russia. Fucking Moscow. Bernie Sanders supporters aren't pissed off because they were being cheated. Fucking Moscow. Environmental supporters. DAPL, the people who are fighting for their land. Obama pardoning a Thanksgiving turkey, while at the same time real indigenous people of this particular country were getting their arms blown off and getting the shit beat out of them by cops paid for by oil companies. But they weren't mad because their land was being stolen. It was those fucking Russians. It was those Russians. Hillary Clinton didn't lose because she was a horrific candidate. She didn't get beat by a reality show host because the public itself rejected her twice. It was those goddamn Russians. Everything is being used with this Russian nonsense. They've gotten so xenophobic where people have been comparing Russians to roaches and rats. I've literally seen people do that in their Twitter posts. I've seen people on TV calling people Russian agents, Russian spies, Russian operatives. Think about this. Think of the reality that these people are existing in if they honestly believe this to be true. Fact is, Russia didn't hack us. The language they've been using, that the Russian government has somehow attacked us. So this is 9/11, that they're coming after us. That 2018, they're going to be coming after us again. Listen to the language that they're using for this. Shouldn't they have something a little bit more than Twitter and Facebook ads if they're going to put this type of hysteria and this type of climate on the public? This is a farce. This is a farce. This is a scam being perpetrated on the American public. They have squat. They are using this in order to obfuscate for the things, the failures, A, of this country, and B, of their particular party and the political apparatus itself. They are facing a populist revolt from the left and from the right, and the way they want to stem that populist revolt is by filling the airways and filling the space with talking about each and everything that doesn't adversely affect their donors. Because fact is, if you deal with those issues, if you deal with the reasons why Democrats lost 1,100 seats throughout the United States, if you deal with the reasons they lost the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the presidency, you directly affect their donors. You have dollars or you have pitchforks. For the last 20, 30 years, you've only had dollars. When your party looks at you and tells you you have nowhere else to go, then you have fundamentally lost control of that party, and you have no capacity to hold them accountable. Donald Trump, yes, is a horrible person. No, they have nothing to connect those things. You have a media that wants to monetize reality. They love this idea of Trump in Russia. They think he's a reality show host, so people love to watch him. Even when they hate his guts, at the very least, they love to watch things that are about him. Those people have been to some degree programmed, and to some degree are susceptible to believing everything that comes up about Trump and Russia because they believe he's a goddamn monster. All of these ideas fit into that worldview. If you're just a classic Democrat, your paradigm of the world doesn't quite understand how she could lose to reality shows. A ham sandwich could be Donald Trump, but for whatever reason, Hillary Clinton couldn't. They don't have a paradigm of the world to explain that. So Trump and Russia, it assuages their understanding of things. The media is doing it for cash. They're doing it because they don't have an understanding of things. I'm making this point that you have a public itself that's somewhat primed for something that has been perpetrated on them without necessarily the evidence there to actually back up that particular claim. That's my point. That's the point I'm making. Hop across the pond for the minute. I wanted to give you the American context of what's taking place before I jump across the pond. A Russian spy, a former Russian spy, has been poisoned. Now, this poison, Theresa May has come up and has pointed the finger that it's quote-unquote highly likely that this came from Russia. No, the investigation hasn't been complete. No, they don't perfectly and absolutely know that. But yes, she did come out and say that it's highly likely Russia did this. And in the same way that they've been doing this in the United States, where the evidence for the most part is lacking, but yes, they have all of these assertions of what's been taking place, she says this is highly likely. She demands a response from Russia. Russia has said this is a clown show and this is a circus. Who's right? Are they telling the truth? David Miliband, the failure of Miliband, the weaker brother, the brother that lost that particular contest to be the labor leader, leaving his weaker brother to be the failure in the labor leader slot, eventually having to resign himself because he couldn't beat David Cameron, and he got beat up every time he was at that dispatch box by David Cameron. But for whatever reason, his weaker brother has comments about Jeremy Corbyn not being more hawkish, not being more hysterical in his response. I knew at some point the Blairites will stick their heads out of a hole and have something to say about it. I didn't expect it to be the weaker brother. Let's take a listen to what he has to say and let's talk about it. David Miliband. Jeremy Corbyn sounded like Trump over Skirple amid criticisms of labor leaders' response. He didn't like his response. Saying that we should talk to our enemies. Oh, he didn't like that. He didn't like that. Rachel Maddow didn't like that either. When Donald Trump says he wants to talk to the leader of North Korea, Rachel Maddow, she didn't like that. I don't like you talking to the leaders of other countries. I don't like that. That's a lefty, by the way. She's supposed to be a lefty. She's taking that position because she doesn't like Donald Trump. If it was George Bush in that office, she would take the opposite position. These people are hacks. Miliband is also a hack. He's using this situation to attack Jeremy Corbyn because he doesn't necessarily like the direction that Labour is taking this. This is purely political reasons. These people are politicians. I would imagine the politicians are just as cynical as the politicians in the United States. He's not coming out about this because he has some love for Britain. He's not coming out this because there's something that digs at him where he has to say something. This is the Blairites taking a shot at the new direction the Labour is taking to actually represent the population of Britain. Let's take a look at what he says. What he says is somewhat ridiculous, and he's trying to tie Jeremy Corbyn to Donald Trump. Dave Miliband has criticized Jeremy Corbyn's comments response to the poisoning of Sergei Skripal, saying he should stand up for British citizens. Asking to communicate with what you consider to be an enemy before the investigation has even been concluded. It's not sitting down for your enemies. It's called having a logical, insane response to something that takes place. Figuring out what happens before positioning yourself in a hostile way against a nuclear nation. That's called common sense. The labor leader sounded like President Trump in calling for dialogue with Vladimir Putin when Russian double agent and his daughter has been left in mortal danger by the nerve agent attack, Mr. Miliband warned. What Jeremy Corbyn was saying was strangely like the kind of things that President Trump says about the need to engage in dialogue, to keep talking to them, the former Labor Foreign Secretary said. No one is saying that all contact is going to be cut off. The question is whether or not there are actions as well as words, because the truth is that it's only actions that shows Russians we are serious. highly likely. The investigation has been completed. They've come to their conclusions. The investigation has not been completed. They've come to their conclusions. The perspective that they're taking on this is as if this is somewhat of a flat fact. They've completely jumped the shark from let's finish the investigation before we make the determination on who we're going to actually blame. They've moved from that point to Russia did it, and Jeremy Corbyn is not being hawkish enough in his response. Jeremy Corbyn, by the way, didn't say do nothing on this. He didn't say that. I don't know what stand up for Britain means. I don't know what he's talking about. Fact is, Jeremy Corbyn, he might have said let's talk to him, but he also added consequences from the standpoint of sanctions or something. Let's take a look at it. Because he's saying Jeremy Corbyn is not standing up for Britain. I have no idea what that means. Those words are slippery. They don't mean anything. Acts of Corbyn should have been stronger. Mr. Miliband added, I think it's about standing up for our citizens, frankly, because it's British citizens. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. This is why your types, the Blairites, the Clintons, the Milibands, that's why your types are the worst political actors. For all intents and purposes, the things that you say don't particularly have meaning. What does it mean to stand up for Britain? What does that mean? Be specific. What sanction? What rules should he have put in place? What should he have said? Should he have cursed at him? Should he have spit on him? What should he have done to get across this idea of stand up for Britain? That doesn't mean anything. That's what I'm getting at. When Hillary Clinton gives a speech and she says nothing in the entirety of the speech, even though she's taken 15 minutes to do it, that's what this is. This is political rhetoric that doesn't necessarily have any context. The only point to the political rhetoric is to try to target the person that he's aiming it at. The words doesn't mean anything. He's trying to hit this emotional level. Ignore your common sense. Ignore your good sense. Ignore the capacity to look at the evidence and make your determinations. Be fearful. Be terrified. This labor leader can't support you. He can't protect you. He's not standing up for Britain. He's a weakling. The Blairites, the tough guys, the people who got you into a war where they killed 1 million people, that ilk. Are you really going to take the word of somebody that was part of that particular faction of the Labour Party? The criticism comes after Mr. Corbyn came under fire for raising the issue of huge donations to the Tory party by wealthy Russian expats, moments after Theresa May's statement blamed the Kremlin for the attacks in Salisbury. The Labour leader faced shouts of shame and disgrace when he said, we're all familiar with the way huge fortunes, often and acquired the most dubious circumstances in Russia, sometimes connected with criminal elements, have ended up sheltering in London and trying to buy political influence in the British party politics. Meddling in the elections, as the Prime Minister put it, and there has been over £800 million pounds, 800,000 pounds worth of donations to the Conservative Party from Russian oligarchs and their associations. Mr. Corbyn added, we need to continue to seeking a robust dialogue with Russia on all issues dividing our countries, both domestic and international, rather than simply cutting off contact and simply letting tensions and divisions get worse and potentially even more dangerous. Some Labour Party joined Conservatives in criticizing Mr. Corbyn. One said Labour leader did not understand the gravity of the threat which Russia poses to this nation. Again, be fearful, be terrified, be scared. Jeremy Corbyn is going to let the Ruskies get you. Jeremy Corbyn is going to let the Russians get you. Speaking to today's program, Mr. Miliband praised the Prime Minister's tone, the common statement given Russia until midnight to explain the nerve agent attack. But he warned that tough action would be difficult without international support, pointing to Mr. Trump's reluctance to take as Putin as a main obstacle. Oh, they're adding in Trump in this. These people are going to inch you closer and closer to war. The fact is, the question is, what do you want your response to be? Is that not a fair question? And do you want to make sure that the people who did it are actually the people who did it as opposed to the highly likely, which I don't quite know what that means? Did they do it or didn't they? And before you get to this point of giving ultimatums, shouldn't you have an investigation to figure out whether it's true or not? Yes, I am extraordinarily skeptical of what things do because I'm a product of my country. Do you realize during JF Kennedy's time, the CIA was planting all sorts of false flags in the country. One false flag they caused in order to come up with this idea of starting a war with the Soviet Union. Literally. They wanted to make it look like it was the Soviet Union's fault. Another false flag was in Cuba. They wanted to sink a boatload of Cubans, either real or simulated, literally, in the memo, real or simulated, in order to give pretext to go into Cuba and start a war with Cuba. The Gulf of Tonkin wasn't real. The war that started the Spanish and American War wasn't real. It was made out of whole cloth. This Russian nonsense in America is not real. These things were done for political ends. Forgive me. I'm extraordinarily cynical. I know the history of this country, and I know some of the things that we've done in a political vein. We've had Operation Mockingbird, where these guys were literally trying to shape the perspective and the opinion of the American public by infiltrating media and news. This is what we've done. So you can understand when I'm analyzing news from other countries and I'm seeing some of the stuff that they're putting forward, and it can't necessarily come with a straight answer of, yes, this is true. I become extraordinarily skeptical, especially when you're talking about a standpoint of the stance of one hostile country to another hostile country. The attack on Jeremy Corbyn in this is absurd. It's absurd. Talking to somebody who you consider in opposition is not a bad thing. Not cutting off communication is not a bad thing. Making sure that what you're accusing them of is, in fact, the truth is not a bad thing. Looking at these things with a certain amount of sense makes a point. Jeremy Corbyn is not saying play dead. Jeremy Corbyn is not saying lay down. He's asking, we should not take any hostile measures without making sure that this is actually what's taking place. That seems as sane as possible to me. I don't like this thing of something happens on day 1, on day 2 they made a decision, and on day 10 they take some action, and then later on you find out it wasn't what we thought it was. This is, make my point. JFK assassination record, the promise of revelation derail FBI and CIA. Part of this that I'm interested in is this. The Miami New Times found a memo discussing a false flag operation that never came to fruition. According to the memo, the CIA considered creating a false communist Cuban terror campaign to turn the public against the Cuban Revolution. We could sink a boatload of Cubans en route to Florida, real or simulated, an official wrote. We could foster attempts of lives of Cuban refugees in the United States, even to the extent of wounding, in instances to be widely publicized. Do you understand what you're reading? Understand the world to which you find yourself. Yes, I understand real things happen. I'm not saying that everything is fake and everything is a false flag and all this other stuff. What I'm telling you is, those things, however, do take place. All of the stuff needs to be put in the context that you have governments that have political ends that they want to accomplish. All of this needs to be put in context that the media assiduously carries that narrative. Do you understand that if this took place, if they would have sunk that boatload of Cubans, if they would have killed and ran that terror campaign in Florida, killing other Americans, that the news media would have taken that story and ran with that story and would have said the Cubans are invading America. Cubans have killed Americans. Cubans have sunk a boatload. We need to go and get Castro. We need to kill Castro. We need to invade Cuba. There will be some people who saying this is bogus, but those people will be pushed to the side and the media would fall in line and they would say, all of you are conspiracy theorists for saying that this doesn't make sense and this is not real. Understand the reality to which you're presented with. Yes, real things happen. How do you know if those real things are actually real things or those real things are simulated? I have no idea. What I would say is you should not necessarily jump to conclusions when it first takes place. And it makes all the perfect sense in the world to do a goddamn investigation and get to the bottom of something without necessarily saber rattling and pointing the finger at another country. Russia has said this is a clown show. Russia has said this is not true. And Russia has asked for evidence. They've essentially said, we want to also analyze what you guys are using to point the finger at us. That makes perfect sense to me. You've accused them of something. Don't they get the opportunity to defend themselves? You would have to give them the evidence. If you're going to have an honest and open investigation, you have to give Russia the evidence. Failure. David Miliband, the weaker Miliband, needs to sit down and shut the hell up. The other Blairites, you've lost. Go away. Same from Hillary Clinton. Go away. Your type, whether it's in Britain, whether it's in the United States, has done a massive disservice to this country and this world. Go the fuck away. Go away. Blair should be in prison, by the way. I will leave it at that. This one is not going to be long. I have to get in and out. Yeah, I got to get in and out. All I'm saying, just be skeptical. That's all I'm saying. That is literally all I'm saying. They are giving you media, whether what's in the media is true or not, you never know. All I'm saying is be skeptical. People have political agendas. And yes, the media and the world around you is shaped in a particular way. Be skeptical of the way that world is shaped. Look at the context of what these guys are saying. Understand that when they're giving you a story, they're giving you a story from a very specific perspective. What is the perspective of the other people in the story? Look, that perspective could be right. That perspective could be wrong. Every perspective that's being espoused can be right or wrong in that scenario. Float between those particular ideas and perspectives. The moment that you realize that, yes, some false flags do happen. Yes, some governments do things because they want to advance certain political objectives. Once you realize that, yes, the media can be shaped around certain ideas and certain narratives that have prospered all throughout the country, then at that point, you become somewhat more skeptical of what's being given to you. If they're going to accuse another country of something that positions you in a hostile tenor with another country, all I'm asking is, shouldn't there be evidence that the public can get, that the public can see, that the public can put their hands on? And shouldn't Russia get the opportunity to contest that evidence? Yes, I'm extraordinarily skeptical of what comes out on this. It's not that I think Vladimir Putin is a great fucking guy. It has nothing to do with Vladimir Putin. It has everything to do with the stories that these guys are prospering and putting out and the reasons these guys are putting these particular stories out. Not to mention the commonality of the stories that are in the United States and Russia. It makes me extraordinarily skeptical, and it is what they say it is, seeing that they've been lying constantly here in the States about this Russian nonsense. To my friends across the pond, be skeptical. I will leave it at that. Alright guys, I will end this. I'll push up the original copy of this. It's been going in and out. My signal's getting a little weird. It's been snowing here, so it might be fucking up the signal to some degree. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks everyone.